Welcome to our podcast, Born in Silicon Valley, where we interview startup founders exploring their journeys, their successes, challenges, and lessons learned. We hope you'll be inspired in discovering what it takes to build a thriving startup. I'm your host, Jay Karen Villarreal, and here with us today, we've got Asim Razzaq, co-founder and CEO of Yotascale. Asim, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jake. Glad to be here.
Great. So, a little bit more about Asim. He is not just the CEO of Yotascale, but he was a senior director of platform engineering at PayPal, where he was responsible for all core infrastructure processing payments and logins. Asim has held engineering leadership roles at early stage and mid stage startups and large companies as well, including eBay and PayPal. His teams have focused on building cloud scale platforms and applications. He's earned his BS in honors at University of Texas, Austin, and is also a published author, which is unique. And I'd like to get into that a little bit too. But before we dive in, where are you joining us from today, Asim?
I'm in San Francisco Bay Area. It's nice and sunny and enjoying the December weather here.
Great. Are you originally from there?
I'm not originally from the Bay Area, but I've been here a while, a number of years.
That's great. I'm from there too originally, and it's always evolving and growing. It's seems to be the mecca of technology, a good place to start a business. Um, can you share a little bit before we get into your story here of the company, a little bit about your upbringing and what really shaped you to become eventually an entrepreneur?
Right. Yeah. So I grew up in Pakistan, a city called Lahore, and did my all of my schooling was there. And I hail from a middle class family, so it wasn't like we had too many means. But I mean, it was a relatively comfortable childhood. And I think what shapes you has many different dimensions. One of which is that I'm the eldest of my siblings, right? So I'm the eldest and have two other siblings. So there's always this sense of responsibility, sense of being the role model for them. I think that was important and key. Um, my in my early childhood, my father he started his own chartered accountancy firm, which is known as CPA here in the U.S. Right, so he I had some example of going on your own and doing your own thing, and going through school ended up being in a lot of competitive situations, including whether it's academics, whether it's sports. I played pretty much most of the sports at that part of the world. Right, so it included field hockey, cricket, soccer. I did competitive debating as well. That was
Oh
part of
wow,
it up until the high school level. And so I think a lot of those things help you get a broader view. So it's not just about academics or just about sports, and your family sort of background and history shapes your thinking. And the mindset was that, and I don't have anything against when people have an inheritance and a lot of money, right? I'm not trying to pigeonhole or corner anybody like that, but from the beginnings that I came from, you had to sort of make it happen, right?
yeah.
And you had to hustle, and you had to um, make a lot of stuff work, right? And I think you hone into that fairly early in your childhood, right? That understanding that things are not going to be handed to you on a platter, right? That you really really need to work hard towards achieving your goals.
I like how you say that hustle and make it happen. It seems to be the underlying theme of a lot of founders when they're building a product or a company. You don't always have the roadmap, you don't always have all the answers. So you have to find a way, use your resourcefulness, not your resources, but your resourcefulness to figure things out. And it seems to be a common thread we're seeing amongst leaders. Um, we're going to talk a little bit about your company. Prior to this, you were at companies that were well established, well branded organizations. Did you have any other startups that you started prior to this company here that were on
I
your own?
didn't start startups, but I was always in startups before PayPal and eBay, right? So I was when I started in 2000. to kind of come and witness the dot-com bust here in the Bay
Oh
Area in
yeah.
those days. For those of us who remember, I, for example, I started a company that was ground level. I was doing multiple roles, including engineering, taking care of the dishes in the kitchen, being the IT person, playing the architect. So it was all of it, right? But I was lucky enough to be around people who are veterans, right? Because it was easy to go to companies that were not doing a lot of meaningful things. So I think since then I've been in startups of different various stages, and I feel that's sort of been my calling and comfort zone. And I've even at PayPal and eBay, I had the opportunity to be more like a entrepreneur because it was at
Hmm.
PayPal when I joined. It was to help build their developer platform, which was the third wave of growth, right? So that theme has been there, whether a large company or small company, right? It's trying to do something that can be world changing or that can have an impact that is beyond just your immediate sphere of influence.
That's great. Thanks for sharing that. The company you have today, Yotascale, when you thought about creating a solution with this in mind, what was the problem you were trying to solve? And you can take this back as far as you want to go in terms of what you saw in your current work, what you saw in the industry, but maybe kind of paint the picture of the space you're in and the problem you identified and really what you're trying to solve for.
Yeah, it's a great question, and a lot of times people think there is an aha moment. Like one day you wake up and it's like I have to do this, and that's how books are written, and that's how history is narrated a lot of times, right? But I think the reality is not typically like that, right? The reality is that the seed is planted somewhere along the way. So I love your context there. Like go as far as you possibly whatever makes sense that's relevant to our conversation. And I think I would go back to when I was doing my undergraduate computer sciences degree. There was a paper that I co-authored with one of the professors there, which was about resource management in disconnected systems. Now it sounds very like nerdy and complex, but the bottom line was that at the time the internet was still, I wouldn't say its infancy, but still had challenges in terms of resources, right? So, how do you leverage the resources that you have in the best possible way? If you have a shopping cart and it gets disconnected, right? Like, how do you make sure the shopping cart is in its best sort of you can manage the state of it and you can connect back and you don't lose it, right? So it was a lot of complex distributed systems type setup, but ultimately it was about optimizing one resource versus other, making those trade offs, right? So put a pin in that, right? That was step one. Step two was I joined a, I would say, mid-stage startup back when I was working in Austin that made software for the airline industry, right? So this is a bunch of PhDs in operations research, right? And I was lucky enough to be the person who was sort of integrating that system into some of the front end systems and all that. But I saw what they were doing, and it was just phenomenal. It was phenomenal. Like the system basically would do things where, let's say, you're Southwest Airlines, which is one of the customers, and the New York airport gets shut down because of weather. Like, how do you
Mm.
route crew? How do you route equipment and planes in the most economical manner or the fastest manner, right? And it's a hard problem because if you look at the FAA regulations, if you look at the airline regulations, I mean, I learned a lot about the airline industry, like just
Lots of moving parts.
looking at all those parts. Like all of a sudden, a small part on a plane can go out of warranty, and then that's it. Like the plane is grounded. Like you could be all loaded as
Right.
passengers, but that's what they say. We have a technical difficulty, right? As an
Right.
example, as one example. But I think the point is that it's also a resource management question with a lot of constraints. There's so many constraints, and this amazing group of people had cracked the code on that, right? So kind of fast forward to the advent of cloud computing in 2007. AWS came out with S3 and what have you. And my bread and butter has been being ahead of platform engineering, right? That's kind of been my key thing. And one of the things I realized with respect to this new way of doing things was that okay, it charges you. You're renting stuff in somebody's cloud, but at the same time, making the economics work becomes very very hard. And I still remember there was one startup I was leading engineering for, where the cost was very high. They were in the data center, and it was extremely high. And so they're like, "You're the cloud guy. Why don't you take us into cloud?" And this is a few years ago, but I mean, circa 2013 or so. And I realized I had contacts at public cloud providers. I had a conversation with them that actually it would be more expensive because
Mm,
I would have to retool. Talent would have to change. So they didn't understand all of the stuff. We would have to have people who understand cloud economics, right? There was not a bunch of tooling and manageability, right? And it was a kind of a low point in my career because it's like, well, you look at public cloud. I mean, it should save a startup, right?
right,
But why does it need so much thinking and change in talent and all of the models you have to build to really understand what's going on? So the manageability, especially from an economic point of view, seemed pretty hard. Well, we solved the problem a different way. Like we used some commodity hardware to kind of get through the problem that we were dealing with, but that stuck with me. I was like, this, you've got to make this work for companies, right? Not work against companies. This is not like if you have a bunch of PhDs in computer science and they know the front and center of everything, then that's where you're able to compete. I mean, if you're a normal company that cannot afford those kind of engineers, you still be able to compete, right? That
right.
was one. The other one was that there were companies solving this problem from an economics point of view. Like if you're in cloud, they would give you, hey, here is how much it costs, here is how much the resources are. But it's a very finance oriented view of the world, which of course finance has to get involved because now it's OpEx. But the engineers were getting left behind, and the engineering teams were getting left behind. It was
Mm,
almost like being weaponized with these reports and running after engineers, as saying like, "Bad boy or bad girl, you're doing a bad job. You're spending all this money," right? And this sort of thinking at the time that engineers don't care about cost, or engineering teams don't care about cost, right?
mm,
And as a head of platform engineering, I wanted to change that perception, right? One, make sure businesses succeed, they're competitive, right? That this doesn't become a liability, right? And two, that we enable and empower these teams to have this, what I call the fourth KPI, right? So you have performance, reliability, you have security, but now it's cost, right?
right,
Has to be a key entrant. So I think that was the genesis of it for me, and it was building over a period of time. So connecting back to, this is a resource management problem. This basically trade offs. There's a lot of different constraints. The system is very complex, especially this day and age, right? We've talked about, when you and I spoke, this containers and Kubernetes and microservices, and think about a new flavor, and then people are in multiple clouds, and now increasingly you have Snowflake and Datadog and other infra components that cost you money. Like, how on earth do you make these trade-offs, right?
right.
So that was kind of the genesis of it.
That's great. There's a lot there that you have to think through. So, when in our conversation, one of the takeaways that I had was you've got engineers that need to be empowered to do their job, to use the tech stack that they have, maybe decide on one of the three or four platforms that are in the cloud, whether it's Amazon, Microsoft, Google, Oracle, whatever it is, and then be able to do their job, make sure that they can do it efficiently. But then you got the CFO coming to you, or the people on their team coming to you saying, great, we're going to build what we're building and the products and the tools are great, but tell me specifically what the costs are going to be and run a report for me. And so there's a lot of back and forth going on with, you may or may not get the right answer, but it's taking a lot of time and no one's really being productive in the process. Ultimately, the information isn't as good as it could be.
Right.
Tell me about your product and the problem it's solving for that scenario.
Yeah, so we call it the CSI crime scene investigation in the rearview mirror, right? Like
Right.
so the CFO has a heart attack, right? The bill is like twice as much from last month than, as it was last month. And so there's a lot of inquiries that happen. It's like, who spent it? Why did they spend it? And so, teams have to go figure this out. While remember, they have to still deliver applications, and
Right.
the job of platform engineering and application engineering doesn't become any easier, right? So where we solve this problem is, one, we bring everybody into the mix, right? We don't say this is an engineering problem or a finance problem, or, I mean, it's a pricing problem too. If you're in product and you have customers, how much is the infrastructure of the customer costing you, right?
Right.
Are you overpricing them? Are you underpricing them? What is it, right? So all those decisions have to be made. And for us, it starts with attribution, right? So one of the key things we say is that you might have heard this expression that the diagnosis prescription without diagnosis is malpractice, right?
Mm.
So you don't
Yeah.
go to a doctor and say, "Well, guess what's wrong with me," and just give me a prescription, right? They have to diagnose and troubleshoot. So the corollary, the similar thing in cloud cost management is, optimization without attribution is malpractice, right? In cloud, because at the end of the day, if you don't understand where the money is going, right, which
Mhm.
team, which owner, as to how you think about the business, right? Then all of your efforts at optimizing are going to fall flat because there's no ownership and accountability, right? There's no context. So, number one, we help companies really attribute in a multidimensional way their cloud cost, right? And we meet them where they are, right? So, tagging is a key thing that gets used in cloud cost management, but it's never perfect. So that's number one. Hey, where is the money going? How do you want to look at it in the context of your business and keeping it dynamic, right? It's not an exercise every month you have to do. So that's number one. And I think from there, you can have lines of accountability, lines of ownership, build that trust in data. Because a lot of time, engineers don't like these reports coming from finance, from some of these tools, because they have no trust in the data. The data is not
Mhm.
accurate. Half of it doesn't even belong to them, right? And some of the recommendations that are there, they're not possible to implement. And I think we do a really good job of making sure that we take all that complexity, simplify it, and we are where engineers want to be. So in tools like Slack, in tools like Jira, right, we have single sign-on, so you make it very very simple for them. I think that's one. The other one is I think we spoke about it, and we did a big launch on this as well. Is that with the advent of generative AI, right, you can even reduce the friction further, right? So now it's a matter of asking questions. It's not a matter of clicking and really going to reports and trying to figure out. So you're effectively getting a cloud cost analyst, right? That is very smart and is getting smarter over time. So the C-suite budget holders who don't want to go read a bunch of reports. I mean, what is the CFO asking? Like, hey, how much did we spend in the last 6 months, right? Why did we overspend? And what do you predict we're going to spend next month, and which customer is costing me the most? I mean, these are the kind of questions at a CFO level. At an engineer level, it's more about the application, right? Because they're responsible for their application and they're responsible for the cost of that. I think combination of those things is very powerful. Is what we find with some of our customers, which includes the likes of Zoom and Okta and Hulu, as an example.
Yeah, big customers and lots of data. It's interesting that generative AI is becoming so pervasive in so many different industries and applications, but this one in particular, to me, seems like it could be very valuable, not just for the engineering side, but for the business side. Like
Right.
if the application allows the business leaders to ask the questions about cost at any level within the company, and you can provide that and just get smarter over time. That's basically not hiring another person to figure that out for you, which is an ROI right there.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the practitioners that we've been working with in our customer base, they said that this has reduced their time from 10 hours a week to 20 minutes. A
Wow.
bunch of questions, right? And then they're answered.
Yeah, very, very cool. Um, if you look into the market today, how big is this market for Yotascale?
I mean, it is huge, right? So it's like people want to put a specific number on it, but the number is always increasing. This is multi-billion dollars, right? Multi-billion dollars in terms of spend. So just look at how a lot of infrastructure is moving into the cloud and increasingly to the infrastructure around, right? And then additionally, there are new companies coming up. I mean, I'm not any successful company that we talk to. They never say like, well, we're reducing a footprint in cloud. They only increase it. So it's hundreds of billions of dollars, right?
Yeah.
That's where things are at. And if you really look at the TAM and SAM and all of that, right, you'll get different views on it, right? Because in some cases, they're gonna, like Microsoft might combine their 365 with just the infra cloud. AWS can report it sort of a little bit differently, but it's certainly hundreds of billions of dollars, and growing rapidly.
Yeah, it's. I mean, you always hear about cloud. What to you is, and you don't have to answer this question, but what do you think is the biggest and the most maybe future looking cloud platform today in the market?
Yeah, it is a tough question to answer. I mean, the way I answer that question is that certainly the big three. I mean, here's how I look at the market, right? Certainly the big three, which is Amazon, Microsoft, and Google. They are the big three. I mean, this is public knowledge, so it's not like
Right.
we're making this stuff up. But even there, it is about specialization, right? And again, this is my take on living and breathing the space. Is that, as an example, Microsoft tends to be very good with enterprise type customers. They tend to have more of a hold in places like Europe, maybe financial services, right? Because if you think about it, with Amazon having a very diverse business, they might be getting to pharma or retail. Like a retail customer will typically tend to go with a Microsoft, right? Just because
Mhm.
there is a competitive aspect to it. But I think if you look at it, certainly Microsoft Azure has done the first play with the partnership with OpenAI when it comes to
Right.
generative AI. Right? They've got that. I mean, I look at AWS as the fact that they've been around the longest when it comes to public cloud infrastructure. For core infrastructure, they're pretty solid, right? So when it's compute, network, storage, and they're building increasingly more and more services. I think Google, from analytics and some of the machine learning point of view, they tend to be further ahead. So this isn't about one cloud fits everything, right? Increasingly, what we're seeing is it's a multi-cloud world, and that could be because of specializations and key capabilities which cloud provider has better. And two, it could be business dynamics, right? Because some of your customers don't want to be in a particular cloud for whatever reason, competitive, compliance, who knows what it is, right? And
Right.
so you have to be in all the clouds where your customers want to be, which end up being this. Then there are specialized clouds, right? Where it might be a cloud specifically for retail or health tech or fintech, right? So you'll have a list of specializations where they might still be built on the big cloud provider, right? But they
Right.
are sort of packaging some of the services there, and then you'll have a long tail, like anything, right? That people do things slightly differently here and there. But that's my view of the world. I mean, it never is like this one is by far the best, right? Because as soon as you say that statement, and it's like by what criteria, right? I'm a
Right.
recovering engineer, so always to me it's
Right.
like, what's the criteria we're talking about, right?
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
it
Yeah. Yeah.
enterprise success? Is it something else? Like, what is it?
Yeah. I'm curious. I mean, my position on that is those three, but Oracle also seems to be getting a lot of news around their cloud strategy. And I just read yesterday in Barron's that they're going to build 100 data centers moving forward, which is not just cloud but infrastructure and a lot there. So very much about the business side of things. Look at all the industries they're in. So there's obviously room for many different competitors and players in the space of cloud, but it's fascinating to see how much it's grown. First the browser comes out, in late 1999s, and then the internet starts to take play, and then enterprise applications, and now renting space, in third-party data centers. And it just seems like you don't really need anything anymore, just a laptop and an idea, and you could start a company and you could build something, and the next thing you know, you're you know sitting where you're sitting, which is incredible. So that's great. Um,
Yeah, just one thing I want to add is like I guess one of the clouds that's not based out of the US is Ali Cloud, like Alibaba Cloud. I mean, I think they also have a global footprint. So I don't want to sort of argue where they fit, but they're certainly in
yeah,
the top five or so, right? And they might argue
international,
globally
definitely.
they're one of the bigger ones. So that's another one worth
As
mentioning.
a company, what's your are you located in the US? Are you international? Are your customers in the US? Are they also international? What's this look like for the
Yeah,
listeners?
we live in a world now where there's no such thing as just one geo, right? And then we were remote day one, so we have obviously employees in the U.S. We also have employees internationally. We have customers in North America, but also customers in Europe primarily. So yeah, I mean it's a globally distributed operation.
Yeah,
And
that's
we
great.
really doubled down with the. I think one of the things the pandemic did was that it helped change people's perception, right? So as I said, we were like that anyway, so we didn't really skip a beat because we were a
Right.
distributed team, and all of our processes were around being able to run in a distributed manner. But I think not a lot of people have embraced that, and it's not that hard.
Yeah. When you started your company and where you're at today, it's never a straight line. What was there a major pivot or a few pivots you can recall that other listeners can learn from? Maybe shave 5, 10 years off of what they're building that you can share in terms of advice or strategy.
Yeah, I thought it was a straight line.
Nah, I
It
was
isn't.
hoping so, but
Well, I think it's a plug. I don't get anything for this, but I think one of the so in terms of advice, right? I also like books because they tend to consolidate the information quite well. So one of the ones that was quite it resonated with me, Scott Belsky's book called The Messy Middle. I
okay.
think Scott Belsky is now CPO at Adobe, and he had his own company that was acquired. And I think I would the way I look at it is a bunch of aphorisms, right? Resourcefulness and not resources, right? And he has a phenomenal graph in there on how you think the journey is and how the journey ends up being, right? So there's a lot of ups and downs there. I think that's number one. Number two is one of the books that shaped my thinking, and I eventually took the plunge. Was the found? It's called the Founder's Dilemma, right?
Mhm.
So I think it really talks to the heart of, are you really built to do this or not? Like, be honest with yourself, right? And it talks about three sort of vectors of financial capital, social capital, human capital, right, which is your skill set, and has a lot of very data backed database. It's a Harvard professor, right, who did that. So I think I can easily recommend those two. And I think based on that, yeah, the journey is never ever the easy. And what I the hustle quotient has to be very high. Let's just start there, right? And you have to be honest with yourself that at any given point, are you doing what is the most critical and most important thing that you should be doing for the company, right?
Mhm.
So it's interesting. I sometimes give that talk on behalf of accelerators and what have you, and you'll have like new founders in the audience, and they kind of chuckle because it's like if you have to make 100 calls to potential customers in a day, right? Every single call you don't make, you're behind. But we delude ourselves by saying, "Oh, let me update my LinkedIn profile. Let me get my." So be comfortable with the uncomfortable. That's the first thing. And be maniacal about what is going to move the needle here. That's one. Two is surround yourself with great mentors, right? And my definition of a great mentor and an advisor is, you'll meet people who will always tear you down. That's one category of people. You'll meet people who will always be your fan, right? No matter what the situation is. And you'll meet people who truly care about you, and they will give you genuine advice on how to improve, and genuine praise, right? When you're not doing when you did something great, right? And you need kind of that, both the things. So I think surrounding myself with some key mentors and advisors was key, because founderhood is very lonely, very, very, very lonely. There's hardly any set of people you can go to and have this kind of conversation, except maybe other founders or people who've kind of been down that path. So surround yourself with other founders that are further along, and other investors, other advisors and mentors. I think that's pretty key. And one of the key things that I realized, when I started first time around, and this is like I tell people, I learned through the sort of the battle scars and the war wounds, that you have this perception like, okay, I'll focus on X, and I'll hire this person for this, and this person for that, and that person for that. But in the early part of a company, your goal in life is to get product market fit. You're figuring that out, right? And people have different definitions of what that is, but it's like, do you have a problem? Do you have a solution for a problem that is unique and differentiated, that a lot of customers are willing to pay money for?
Mm.
That's your goal in life, right? And the CEO founder is the only person who can lead the company through that. you know Early parts of the company, I thought maybe the salesperson could lead us through that because they're talking to customers and all that. And the pivot point I would say is that one of the key ones on earlier on was realizing that I'm the only person who can lead the company through this and should lead the company, right? And if you're an enterprise B2B, the first 10, 15 sales end to end should be closed by the founder.
Yeah.
No exceptions, zero exceptions. You cannot give me an excuse in the world, right,
Yeah.
as to why that shouldn't be the case. If you're the CEO founder, that's your job. Okay, if you're CPO, I mean, everybody's helping with sales, right? Because unless you really understand the problem, you cannot really bring people in to teach them
Right.
how to sell this. And then I think the last one I would say is people, right? I think some of the my biggest mistakes that I learned from were sort of hiring challenges. And it's not, I never say that the person wasn't good enough. It's like the context wasn't the best fit for them, for what we needed, right? And you get starry eyed and all of that, right? And I think it's important to be honest with yourself. And I take every hiring mistake as a mistake that I made, right? It's never
Yeah.
on the other person, right? Because, in general, people are smart and they can do good things. But if it wasn't the right context and the right person for that right stage, it's going to be challenging. And I think the two sort of key moments that you mentioned, one is when the container revolution circa 2018-19 started, that we capitalized on that. That was a big boon for us and it was phenomenal. And you know then we had total platform costs, so not just doing one cloud provider, but all multiple cloud providers and any cost from an infrastructure point of view. And now we're at that inflection point of really rethinking and reimagining the product by leveraging a lot of the aspects of generative AI, like combining the domain with some of the capabilities, right? And that's the exciting future for us. So I know it's a little bit of a long-winded answer. There's never one thing, but I think the CEO founder's job is very, very hard, and being honest with yourself, especially with people around you who can be honest with you, is very important.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thanks for sharing that. I want to go back to somebody you mentioned, Scott Belsky. We're in the business of helping companies scale. We recruit for them. We tell the story of the founder and the product they're bringing to market, the problem they're solving, and find the right people in the process. That's what we do. My first company I built got acquired, and that company was also a staffing company. But we got a call to go. We were, based in California. There was a company that found us online, wanted us to come out and present our services to them, but they were based in New York City.
Hmm.
So I fly out to New York City with my top recruiter, and we show up at their office. And in New York City, you don't really know what you're getting into. We see a brownstone with the address, so this is the office, and we hit the button. We go up the elevator. We come into it. It's a condominium, in New York City, and we thought going to an office of a startup, but it was a startup, but it was a team living in a condo.
Hmm.
So we start talking, and they're telling us about their product, and they're building these services and this product that's going to help artists, that can help graphic designers and all this. And we're like, okay, not exactly sure how that's going to work. What do you need? They're like, well, we need a product developer and maybe some engineers. And okay, but they wouldn't really tell us what it was. The founders had come out of Harvard, and the person that came out and sat down at the kitchen table with us was Scott Belsky.
I see. Nice.
And he said, I just graduated, a couple of years ago from Harvard. I'm building this platform. It's going to be for,
Behance, right? I think
yeah, designers, and ended up becoming Behance. They wouldn't share the name with us
I
at the
see.
time. And they were actually making like physical booklets and things that maybe they would be, I don't know, providing to their users or whatnot. But anyway, long story short, ended up building a company. They got acquired by Adobe for 100 million, and that's you just never know who's doing what and where they're doing it, but you can do things anywhere today. So really could. The other part I want to bring up was you talked about people, and so many companies that we talk to, the leaders tell us, it's not me. Like I had the idea and we built what we have, but if I didn't have the team, we wouldn't have what we have today. So it's not always about the leader. It's about making sure you have the right and hopefully the best people on the team. But it's always hard to figure out if you haven't done a lot of hiring or haven't led a lot of companies. If you're an earlier founder, what's been some of your strategy in filtering out to make sure you get the talent right as you've grown your company?
Yeah, and just to address the question, somebody might have done a lot of hiring, like at a large company. It's not going to be very relevant at a startup. And for obvious reasons, right? Because that's a very different job description. So I think it kind of changes as the startup evolves, right? There is pre-product market fit, product market fit, post-product market fit, which is pre-go to market fit, and then post go to market fit, right? That's how I kind of look at it. And I had to kind of put this matrix down for myself. And each one of these phases has like how much revenue and what are the kind of people. So I look at the people equation from that point of view, right? I think one thing that is very it's important across the board is I call it the hustle quotient, right? Which is, you know, do you have that change the world mindset? I know this sounds very cliche and all of that, right? And are you comfortable with uncertainty, right? And I think there's a series of questions and filtering that one can do in terms of determining that. The skill has to be there. If you're hiring an engineer or you're hiring somebody to help on marketing, of course they need to know the subject matter. But I think the key differentiator that I've seen where our hiring has gone south versus, it has really sort of flourished, those people have flourished, is that, right? Like the can do attitude, not worrying about, okay, this is not my responsibility, this is not my boundary, right? So I look at early employees, you always have to look at them as company builders. They're building the company with you, right?
Mhm.
So they might not be co-founders, but at the same time, they have to have a lot of that mindset, right? And being in those trenches. And they're not, I have to say, like, it's very hard to find that type of a person or persona, right? And we can get into like where those people are and how you can get to them. I think that's one key thing. The other one is the network. You really have to tap into your network. That's why when I talk about the founder, that book about founder's dilemma, it's your human capital, which is your social capital, your network. Network doesn't mean your Facebook friends. It means if you're coming from a certain industry and there's certain types of people that fit that, you want a referral. You always want a referral. Going through an external party is always going to be challenging, right? Because you don't know what you're getting into. So anyways, I think those are a lot of the key things. And then expectation setting, a lot of times, especially even early on in the company, like I didn't do a good job of setting the right expectation. So whoever
Mhm.
comes in, it's not like just do whatever you like, right? It's like, here is my expectation of you. And don't you use there is still people management aspects to it, right? Which is, don't just skip one-on-ones, right? Even if you're
Yeah.
earlier on, right? There has to be time where you're sitting down and you're talking about, hey, how are you doing, right? What can I help with, right? That's part of the servant leadership piece of it. But on that continuum, be aware, right? Because if there is somebody who's more has a lot of success in terms of go to market fit, post go to market fit, like they kind of thrive in the scale phase, right?
Mhm.
And you try to bring that person in a pre-product market fit where you have no idea like what is the solution you're going to end up developing, right? Ultimately, it's like figuring it out. Their sort of mindset is going to be, let's go, right? Let's accelerate as fast as we can because that's what they know. And you're confused, like, well, why did we hire the wrong person? No, you hired the person for the wrong context.
Mhm.
So figure to get problem solvers in that, get people who are not, I mean, that's the other thing I will say, who are, how should I say, it's they're not afraid of doing the hard thing. I mean, I have had people who have a hard time, even if they are in sales, texting a prospect when the prospect has given them their cell phone and they're not responding. Like I sent an
Right.
email and I didn't follow up email, I don't get a response. Why don't you just text the person? I mean, it's legit. You have
Yeah.
right, but we have this like, I don't know, right? But that's being comfortable with the uncomfortable.
Right.
Like, are you
Yeah.
able to do the thing that makes you feel uncomfortable, right?
Yeah.
And look, there's cliched stuff like, oh, they if they play sports and all that. I think those things can help. Those things can
Mhm.
help. But pay attention. I a lot of times ask people about their journey, just the way we're talking, right? Pay
Right.
attention to the journey. Again, where did you grow up? Right? What was it like growing up? Right? What were the challenges? Right? What is the biggest risk that you took? I mean, this is a question I ask, and it's very telling. A lot of times people don't have an answer to this question. Maybe it's a tough question. Like, what's the biggest risk that you took professionally, or if you want to share personally? Like, I'm not trying to pry into anyone's personal life, like, but right. And if it's like, well, I went to a master's degree when I should have gone for a job. Like, that's not. I mean, I get it, but that's not right. And I think, or talk about a really really uncomfortable situation that you managed. I mean, I think you have to sort of up the ante in terms of some of that conversation and make it real to see if
Yeah,
there's something there.
I agree with that. And I never thought this before, but I believe it now. Is that I think it's good to have a little bit of that, not craziness, but like the ability to have the faith and have the courage to make that call or to make that text or to step up, and whether you win or lose a deal, or you have that conversation, that tough conversation with your manager that you're fearful of. I think it's respected, and also you get things more often when you
Of course.
when you take the step that others won't take, especially in a startup, that you have to be willing to, you're breaking doors down, you're creating breakthroughs, and it's tough. It's not easy. And you have to have the right people that are not afraid at the end of the day.
Yeah, they're not. At the end of the day, they're not afraid of failure. That's the psychological core part of it, because we're wired increasingly. It's like nobody wants to know. I mean, that's why an SDR job to me is insane, right? Like, you're calling all day long and you're going to get 100 no's and maybe one yes, right? Sales is hard from that point of view, right? So it's like you have to have thick skin and you need to constantly take the shots, and you have to have some emotional intelligence, right? You can't
Right.
just keep like, if you sense the other person is frustrated, or you don't want to have a bad reputation out there. But at the same time, you have to do the table stakes and be completely comfortable with failure. That's the thing. That doesn't mean you are a failure. It's like, what's that, Wayne Gretzky, right? 100% of the shots that you won't take are not going to go in. Like,
Right.
that is literally right. That is literally
Yeah.
so true. And startup is not like you need some rocket science. It's all these basics. Like,
Yeah.
are you rolling up your sleeves? You're doing the grunt work. Do you have people who are similarly minded and they're getting stuff done? So you're not sleeping, yeah, it's a sleepless night. Like, oh my god, I don't know if this person is doing the things that they should be doing, right?
Yeah.
And you have to lead from the front, because if you're saying all these things and you yourself are like shying away from, oh, should I get on that plane to New York to meet this customer because we might have churn or not have the renewal, your team is going to be like, okay, you're saying one thing, but when it really matters, you're not really, leading the charge. You're not leading from the
Right.
front. I mean, that's the thing.
I think, and it's a good part around leadership is you're in a position to lead. That's what you're there to do, lead.
That's right. There's plenty of managers. I know that again tends to be cliched, but like, you can walk into a company and within a week, you don't have to have anybody's titles. You would know who the leaders are, and they
Yeah.
might not even have the title,
Right.
and a
They
lot of them they
should.
don't. Right, a lot of them they don't, right? So I
Yeah.
think, how do you lead is, and I think how do you lead is critically important in the difficult times. It's very
In the
easy in the
pivots.
good times,
Yeah.
right? And we talk about our values of the company, right? Like, integrity is only tested in difficult situations, and values are
Yeah.
only tested in difficult situations. They're not really tested in good situations.
Right.
If the revenue is amazing, and all customers are lining up, and the IPO was phenomenal, right? Yeah, everybody's gonna. But I think, and I think this is gonna remind me one thing. Like, the human character piece of it is very important as well. Like, how is this
100%.
person as a human being?
Right.
How do they operate, right? And I forget who the story is related to. I'm forgetting the name of the person, but it was kind of, they had an interesting interview technique where they would take the person for lunch, and maybe you remember, and they actually ahead of time asked the server or the waiter to say mess up their order, and they want to see how this person reacts
Yeah.
in that situation. And it's like, there's a lot you can learn from somebody in that situation, right?
Yeah. No, that's great. And, I always, one of the, you never really have foolproof litmus tests, but, we like really organized people at our company. like that they're on point, they know what they're doing, they take care of it, they execute, they're on time, like they're very well oiled in a lot of different ways. And it's hard to get that in an interview. Like you can't say how well
Absolutely.
organized are you. You might have a test you can give them, and maybe some different ways that you can kind of see. But I always thought, why don't let's go to lunch, but have them drive, and when you get in the car, look around the car and see if it's organized and see how and see how they are, kind of put together. And just those little things are tell signs of, how you operate. So, one thing that you mentioned was integrity and character. Those are so critical for the retention of the right people, and just the communication too. If you tell me you're going to do something, I expect you to do it. But if you're not going to do it, that's okay too. Tell me.
Right.
Um, and there's so many times, especially in the SDR world where you're selling, that somebody may tell you something that you like to hear, but they're not going to follow through and really buy. And you have to be able to understand that that's part of their process. But when you can work with the right customers that also have the same integrity that you do as a company and your people, that's really when you have, really good partnerships. And that's what we strive for when we operate with companies we work with and our employees when we hire them. So I think you touched on some really important things that oftentimes are part of how you were brought up. Those are
Right.
things
That's
that were
true.
embedded in you. So, if you have a good relationship with your parents, that's probably a good start of it. Someone that's probably got pretty good high integrity, good character. So taking it back as far as you need to in interviewing is what we like to do. But anyway, really excited about what you shared. I mean, your story. What's exciting? What are you looking forward to in 2024 for Yotascale?
Yeah, I touched on this a little bit, right? So this whole rethinking and reimagining, especially with the combination of total platform cost and embedding this conversational AI into our product has been quite exciting. So when we say total platform cost, it's it's a it can be an intimidating area because there's a lot of different pieces to it. But we follow the 80-20 rule, which is 20% of the infrastructure that's driving 80% of the cost, right? So I think we're very excited about that. The on the Gen AI piece of it, we are getting that into all aspects of the product and moving from, in Gen AI it's level 1, level 2, level 3, right? So going from objective to very subjective. So we're at the point where we can ask subjective questions, but we want to build on that even further. So you can ask very complex, very subjective questions, right? And so the more of that we can do, that's an ongoing exciting space. And one of my favorite parts of um, the operations of the company is when the team does the demo, like, look what we can do now, and look what we can do now. I think that's been pretty exciting. And then for us, it's really closing the loop when it comes to cost management, right? Economics. So it's like from code to deploy and back, right? Because that's the cycle. So how can we help you with respect to, you know, at the time of coding, is this going to be an expensive piece of code in terms of running, right? To
Mm,
all the way to when it's deployed, right? What are the things we can do for you that can sort of right size things and close the loop for you? So I think uh, the more we can do there, that's going to be exciting. So the metric for us is engagement and reducing friction. So things that used to take hours, they should be seconds now, right?
mm,
And if we can improve the job of the practitioners, where you can put the lens of developer productivity, right? What is developer
mhm,
productivity at the end of the day, right? There are a lot of the things that are taken care of for you, and then you can focus on shipping more code, right?
mhm,
So for engineers, as one constituent, this becomes, hey, I don't have to worry about cost management anymore. Majority of the stuff is taken care of. I just have to be the main pilot, and I've got a co-pilot. Let's make it happen. For the C-suite, right? I don't have to chase people down. It's a simple 1-2 question without even talking to somebody that we can answer. I think that's exciting for us in 2024. That's the journey we're on, and I think we live in exciting times. I mean, there's a lot of innovation that's happening, and it's great to be at a place where we have an amazing set of customers, because data is everything, right?
mhm.
And they're very engaged, and they're pulling us in this direction.
That's great. Well, for listeners out there that could be engineers, maybe on the platform side, maybe on just the software side at any capacity, or product people in general that might want to learn more about you or learn more about your company, where would they go?
So it's yotascale.com is the website. You can find us on LinkedIn. And I'll do a plug as well, which is a little bit of my pay it forward. I have a podcast myself called Always an Engineer. So if you are an engineer or in engineering leadership or an aspiring engineering leader, it's a set of podcasts that I draw from my battle scars, if you will, and where I interview some of the key practitioners that I admire and helping people not make those mistakes that I made when I was going through
Yeah,
the journey.
that's great. Well, really appreciate you jumping on the podcast here. You've heard it directly from Asim, and I really appreciate your insights and knowledge. I'm sure others will learn and hopefully shave years off of what they're building as a company too. Um, there's another podcast you can go to, as Asim shared, Always an Engineer. I listened to a couple podcast episodes and I thought it was very exciting. Um, as you also look at growing in the new year, what's that look like for you? Do you have roles open that others might want to look at online? Do you have jobs posted? Where could they go if they wanted
Yeah,
to
I think the
apply to your
careers
jobs?
page on our website is the best place to look at what's current.
Got it. Okay, cool. All right. Well, thanks for hopping on. Really appreciate your courage for coming in and sharing your story, and really appreciate the listeners for listening. It means the world to us that you spent your time with us today. I'm Jake here in Villarreal. Happy to be with you here today and look forward to hearing and seeing you all in the next episode. Until then, take care. Before we wrap up, I want to give a big shout out to all the entrepreneurs that have joined to make this podcast possible. And for all the listeners for listening. It means the world to me that you chose to spend your time with us today. I'm your host, Jake Aaron Villarreal, signing off for now, but can't wait to connect with you all soon on the next episode. Take care. This show is sponsored by Match Relevant, a company that helps venture-backed startups find the best people in the market, and they do it in 3 simple steps. First, they sit down with founders to understand their story. Second, they tell their story into multiple candidate channels. And third, they schedule interviews within 48 hours. Find us at matchrelevant.com to learn more about how we do it.